Welcome, everybody, to something I'm going to call, well, literally, Quag Keep. Today, part of this is going to be going over to YouTube afterward. I'm going to just cut and paste some of this after the stream's over. But I'm going to do an audiobook, and I want to go over why. I've been around a bit, half a century at this point. And one thing that has pervaded me is my name, Geekonomicon. It's just something that is me. I grew up enthralled by Dungeons and Dragons, enthralled by comic books, movies, anime, cartoons, you name it. If it was geek-centric, I was into it. But let's get back to that Dungeons and Dragons thing there. Everybody loves Critical Role nowadays, and they give credit where credit's due, and they recently talked about how Record of Lodoss War was a big influence on what would become Critical Role, because Record of Lodoss War was a D&D campaign put into manga and anime form. But there was something before that. Something that set the ground running for what would be Record of Lodoss War and what would be Critical Role. That would be a book by author Alice Norton, also known as Andre Norton, called Quag Keep. She was invited by Gary Gygax to play D&D. She loved the campaign so much, she turned it into a book. This is published way before Record of Lodoss War. So I'm going to be sitting here at the fire, but before I start actually reading the story, I'm only going to do chapter 1 today. We're going to read the foreword and her acknowledgement at the beginning. So the foreword is as follows, because this is from the omnibus, which is Quag Keep and Return to Quag Keep. Return to Quag Keep, she wrote with Gene Rabb, but she passed away before the book was finished, and Gene Rabb finished it. But she did write Quag Keep. So, in 1978, science fiction's grand dame Andre Norton, Alice Norton, was given a wonderful opportunity to take part in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons, and to have it run in her own home by none other than the game's creator, Gary Gygax. The result? Quag Keep. When a gaming master... This is the synopsis for the story. When a gaming master meets with his gamers to show off his newly acquired warrior miniatures, one gamer, Martin, is strongly attracted to his sword-wielding miniature and seizes it as his own. Instantly, he finds himself transported into the D&D realm of Greyhawk. But experiencing that realm through the mind of a fighter, Milo Joggin. His fellow gamers are also transformed into D&D characters, from Berserker to Battle Maid to Lizard Man. Like Martin, they each inexplicably sport an unremovable bracelet containing spinning dice. And each must face an immutable fate to find his way to Quag Keep, the most fearsome place in all the realm, and destroy a malevolent force determined to snuff out the mundane world. But first, they must survive the journey there. That sounds familiar. It should, because this story also inspired the fondly remembered Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. The acknowledgement is as follows. The author wishes to express appreciation for the invaluable aid of Gary Gygax of TSR, expert player and creator of the wargame Dungeons & Dragons, on which the background of Quag Keep is based. I wish to also acknowledge the kind assistance of Donald Wollheim, an authority and collector of fantasy miniatures, whose special interest was so valuable for my research. Okay, that being said, Quag Keep has heralds back to a lot. This did a lot. It influenced quite a bit. It influenced a lot of people. And without it, now, Record of Lodoss War, the creators of Record of Lodoss War, they had their own, they traversed their own path to making their thing a manga and a anime. There's nowhere that says that they were influenced by Quag Keep. But it cannot be understated that this was Critical Role. This was Record of Lodoss Wars before any of them had a chance to have a glimmer in it, in the spotlight. And I've waited for I lost my copy of this a long time ago, and I finally, thanks to my resources of digging through and trying to find a used copy, I have the omnibus right in my hands of Quag Keep and Return to Quag Keep. And I am going to be doing an audio of this. And I thought it fitting because Dungeons & Dragons made me become a writer. Comic books made me become a writer. Video games made me become a writer. And the person you see sitting before the fire right there, Raivu, that's a character in a free story that I'm doing on my Discord right now. But she is going to actually, she's not going to have any audio cues or anything, but she's going to sit there and read alongside me as we go. So without further ado, I present to you Quag Keep by Alice Norton. Extern produced the package with an exaggerated flourish and lifted the lid of the box to pluck out the shredded packing with as much care as if he were about to display the crown jewels of some long-forgotten kingdom. His swordsmanship brought the others all closer. Extern liked such chances to focus attention, and tonight, as the referee chosen to set up the war game, his actions were backed with special authority. He unwrapped a length of cotton and set it on the table. Between the weight and game sheet, a 2-inch figure, larger than any they habitually played with. It was indeed a treasure. A swordsman, complete with shield, on which a nearby microscopic heraldic design blazed forth in brilliant enamel paints. The tiny face of the figure was sternly set above the rim of the shield, shadowed by a helmet with a small twist of spike rising from it. There was an indication of mail on the body, which had been modeled as if the figure were advancing a step in grim determination. The sword in the hand was a length of glittering metal, more like well-polished steel than lead, which was the usual material for playing figures. Martin stared at it in fascination. He had seen many expertly painted and well-positioned war game figures, but this gave him a queer feeling, as if it had been turned out of a mold, but rather had been designed by a sculptor in the form of a man who once had lived. Where did you get that? Harry Cumden's slight hesitation of speech was more pronounced than usual. A beauty, isn't it? Extern purred. A new company, QK Productions, and you wouldn't believe the price either. They sent a letter and a list. Want to introduce their pieces to well-known players. After we won those 2 games at the last convention, I guess they had us near the top of their list. To Martin, Extern's explanation was only a meaningless babble. His hand had gone out without his conscience willing to touch fingertip on that shield to make sure it did exist. It was true that the makers of the playing pieces for the fantasy wargame were starting to try to outdo each other in the production of unusual monsters, noble fighters, astute elves, powerful dwarves, and all the other characters a player might call for. Identify with playing, even keep on display like some fabulous antique chessmen between games. Martin had envied those able to equip themselves with the more ornate and detailed figures, but the best he had seen in displays could not compare to this. Within him came a sudden compulsion. He must have this one. It was beyond any doubt meant for him. Extern was still talking as he unwrapped his other figures. Set them out, his elbow firmly planted, meanwhile, on the referee notes for the coming game. But Martin's attention never wavered from the swordsman. This was his. He grasped it lovingly. There were good smells and stale ones fighting for dominance in a room lit by the baskets of fire wasps. One which was close enough so that he could see every old stain on the table at which he sat. By his right hand stood a drinking horn mounted on a base of dull metal. His right hand. He stared at both hands, the fists lightly clenched and lying on the scored board. It seemed that his mind had skipped something of importance, as a heart might skip a beat. This was, of course, the sign of Harvel's axe, a dubious inn on the edge of the Thieves' Quarter in the city of Greyhawk. He frowned, troubled. But there had been something else, something of importance, of which only a hint slithered so swiftly through his brain that he could not fasten on it quickly enough. His name was Milo Dragon, a swordsman of some experience, now unemployed. That much was clear, and the hands before him were bare below the sleeves of very supple, dark-colored mail, which had a hint of copper in it, yet was darker brown. Turned back against the wrists were mitts fastened to the sleeves, and about each of the thumbs was the wide band of her ring. The one to the right was set with an oblong stone of dull green, across which, in no discernible pattern, wandered tiny red veins and dots. The setting on the left was more extraordinary, an oval crystal of gray, clouded in film. On the right wrist, there was a glint of something else. Again, that faintest hint of other memory, even of alarm, touched Milo's mind. He jerked down the right mitt and saw, banded over the mail itself, a wide bracelet of metal as richly bright as newly polished copper. It was made of two bands, between which swung a hardly visible gimbals, where a series of dice, 3-sided, 4-sided, 8-sided, 6-sided. They were the same bright metal as the bracelet that supported them, but the number on them were in glistening bits of gemstones, so tiny he did not see how any gemsmith could have set them in so accurately. This, with his left hand, he touched that bracelet, finding the metal warm to his fingertip. This was important. His scowl grew deeper. But why? And how? And he could not remember having come here. Also, he raised his head to stare about uneasily. He sensed that he was watched. Yet there were none in that murky room he was quick enough to catch eyeing him. The nearest table to his own was also occupied by a single man. He had the bulk, the wide shoulders and thick mail-covered forearms of a man who would be formidable in a fight. Milo assessed him, only half-consciously, with the experienced eye of one who had needed many times in the past to know the nature of an enemy, and that quickly. The cloak the other man had tossed to the bench beside him was of hide covered with horny bristles, and his helmet was surmounted with a realistic and daunting representation of a snarling boar, brought dangerously to bay. Beneath the edge of it, his face was wide of the cheekbone and square of jaw, and he was staring as Milo had been, with his hands on the tabletop before him. Between them crouched a bright green-blue pseudo-dragon, its small wings fluttering, its arrow-pointed tongue darting in and out. And on his right wrist, Milo drew a deep breath. This stranger wore a bracelet twin to his own, as far as a swordsman could see without any truly examining it. Boar helm, boar cloak, memories and knowledge Milo did not consciously search or arose. This other was a berserker, and one with skill enough to turn werebore if he so desired. Such were the chancy companions at best, and the swordsman did not wonder now that their two tables so close together were theirs alone, that the rest of the patrons, eating and drinking, had sought the other side of the long room. Nor was he surprised that the stranger should have the pseudo-dragon as a traveling companion or pet, whichever the relationship might be. For the wares, like the elves and some others, could communicate with animals at will. Once more Milo gave a searching, very steady survey of the others in the room. There were several thieves, he guessed, and one or two foreigners, who he hoped for their own sakes were tough enough to defend themselves if they had wandered into Havel's axe without the warning. A cloaked man who he thought might be a druid of low rank was spooning up stew with such avidity that spattering drops formed goblets of grease on his clothing. Milo was particular at attention to the right wrists. Those he could see were certainly innocently bare of any such banding as he and the berserker wore. At the same time, the impression that he was being watched, and not with any kindness, grew in him. He dropped, hand to sword hilt, and, for the first time, noted that a shield leaned against the table. On it was the emblazoned and intricate pattern which, though dented in places and plainly weather-worn, had once been skillfully done. And he had seen that. Where? The vagrant curl of memory grew no stronger for trying to grasp it. He grinned sourly. Of course, he had seen it many times over. The thing was his, wasn't it? And he had calluses from the weight along his arm to prove that. At least, he had the wisdom to pick a table where he had sat with his back to the wall. Now, there flowed through his mind half memories of other times when he had just been such certain lodgings. A table swung up and forward could serve as a barrier to deter a rush, and the outer door? There were two doors in the room. One led, uncurtained, to the inner part of the inn. The other had a heavy leather drape over it. Unfortunately, that was on the opposite side of the room. To reach it, he would have to pass a group he had been watching with quick glances. 5 men gathered close together, whispering. They had seemed to show no interest in him, but Milo did not depend on such uncertain reassurance of innocence. The eternal war between the law and chaos flared often in Greyhawk. It was, in a manner of speaking, a free city, since it had no one overlord to hold it firmly to his own will. For that reason, it had become a city of masterless men, a point from which many expeditions, privately conceived and planned for the despoiling of ancient treasures, would set out, having recruited the members from just such masterless men as Milo himself, or perhaps the Berserker, only an arm's length away. But if those on the side of law recruited here, so did the followers of chaos. There were neutrals also, willing to join with either side for the sake of payment, but they were never to be wholly depended upon by any man who had intelligence, or they might betray one at the flip of a coin or the change of the wind itself. As a swordsman, Milo had vowed to law. The Berserker had more choice in such matters, but this place, under its odors of fresh and stale food, stank to Milo of chaos. What had brought him here? If he could only remember, was he spell-stuck in some fashion? That idea caught and held in his mind to worry him even more. No man, unless he had won the high adeptship, and therefore no longer entirely human, could even begin to reckon the kinds of numbers of spells that might be set to entangle the unwary. But he knew that he was waiting, and he again tested the looseness of the sword within its sheath, keeping his other hand close to the edge of the table, tense as a man may be before he reaches the position he was chosen for, his own defense. Then, in the light of the fire, Wasps, he caught the flashes from his wrist, dice moving. Again, he half remembered a fast, fleeting wisp of some other knowledge he should have and did not, to his own danger. What it was not the suspected men in the corner who were the threat. Instead, the Berserker got to his feet. Up the mighty thickness of the mailed arm fluttered the pseudo-dragon, to perch upon his shoulder, its spear tongue darting against the checkpiece of his heavy helmet. He had caught up the cloak, but he did not turn to the leather curtain of the outer door. Instead, he took 2 strides and stood towering over Milo. Under the brush of his brow, his eyes held a red glint like those of an angry boar, and he thrust out his hand and wrist to match Milo's. There, too, showed the glint of the dice turning by themselves on their almost invisible gimbals. "I am Nail Fangtooth." His voice was close to a low grunting, and as his lips moved to form the words, they betrayed the reason for his self-naming. 2 teeth had as great as tusks set on either side of the lower jaw. He spoke as if compelled to, and Milo found that he answered as if he must offer some password. Thus the danger that made the flesh crawl break forth. Yet, at the same moment, he knew that his sense danger did not come from this mighty fighting machine. "I am Milo Joggin. To sit you down, fighting man." He moved his shield, stood farther along the bench to make room for the other. I do not know why, but Fangtooth's eyes no longer held those of the swordsman. Rather, he was looking with an open expression of perplexity at their bracelets. "But," he continued after a moment's pause, "this is what I must do. Join with you. And this," he attempted to slip the bracelet from his thick wrist, but could not remove it, "is what commands me, after some fashion of its own." "We must be bespelled," Milo returned, frankness with frankness. Berserkers seldom sought out any but their own kind. Among their fellows, they had comradeships that lasted to the shores of death and beyond. For the survivor of a fatal encounter was then aware always of only one driving force: the need for revenge upon those who had slain his other self in battle kinship. The Berserker scowled. Bells. They have a stink to them. And yes, swordsman, I can pick up that stink a little. Afrita, the pseudo-dragon flickered its thread of a tongue like a signal, has already sniffed it. Yet it is not, I think, one sent by a dark-loving devil. He had kept his voice low with a visible effort, as if the natural tone was more of a fulfilled roar, full-throttled roar. Milo noted that the eyes beneath those heavy brows were never still. That Nail Fangtooth watched the company in the room with as keen an eye for trouble as he himself had earlier. Those who whispered together had not once made any move to suggest that the two were of interest to them. The shabby druid licked his spoon, then raised the bowl to his lips to sup down the last of the broth it contained. And two men wearing the shoulder badges of some merchant's escort kept drinking steadily as if their one purpose in life was to see which first could drink enough of a skinful to subside the rush-strewn, ill-swept floor. None of them wear these, Milo indicated the bracelet on his own wrist. The dice were now quiet on their gimbals. In fact, when he tried to swing one with his fingernail, it remained as fixed as if it could never move. Yet, he was the same. Yes, it was the same one he had seen turn just before Nail had joined him. No, the Berserker blinked. There is something that nimbles at the mind as a squirrel worries away at a nut. I should know, but I do not. And you, swordsman. His scowl did not lighten as he looked directly at Milo. There was an accusation in it, as if he believed the swordsman knew the scent of the strange meeting, but was purposefully keeping it to himself. It is the same, Milo admitted. I feel I must remember something, yet I beat against a locked door in my mind and cannot win through that to the truth. I am Nail Fangtooth. The Berserker was not speaking to Milo now, but rather affirming his identity as if he needed such assurance. I was with the brethren when they took the Mirror of Lois and the standard of King Everin. Then that my shield brother, Engol Wildhand, was cut down by the snakeskins. Also, it was there later that I picked Afrita from a cage, so she joined with me. He raised a big hand and gently stroked the back of the dragon at a spot between it continually fluttered wings. These things I remember, yet there was more. The Mirror of Lois, Milo repeated. Where had he heard of that before? He raised both fists and pressed them against his forehead, pushing up the edge of the helmet he wore. The edges of the two thumb rings pressed against his skin, giving him a slight twinge of pain. But nothing answered his memory. Yes, there's pride now in his companion's voice. That was a mighty hosting. Orcs, even the specter of Lois herself stood against us. But we had the luck of the throws with us for that fight. Luck of the throws. Now it's Sanctu's turn to look at the bracelets on his wrist. The throws, he repeated for the second time. It means. His face twisted, and he beat upon the table for it with one calloused fist. So mighty a blow, the horn leaped through it and did not overturn. What throws? He scowled. The scowl turned upon Milo, now that he was new. I don't know. Milo wet his lips with his tongue. He had no fear of the Berserker, even though the huge man might well be deliberately working himself into one of his rages that transcended intelligence, and made such a fighter impervious to weapons and some spells. Once more he struggled to turn the dice on the bracelet. far back in his mind he knew them, but they had very definite purpose. Only here and now he was like a man set down before some ancient roll of knowledge that he could not read, and yet he knew that his life perhaps depended upon translating it. These, he said slowly, one turned just before you joined me. They are like gamer's dice, save that there are too many shapes among them to be ordinary. Yes, Hale's voice had fallen. Still, I have thrown such in for a reason or reasons. But why? Or where? I cannot remember. I think, swordsman, that someone thinks to play a game with us. If this be so, he shall discover that he has chosen not tools but men, and therefore we be worse for their folly. If we are bespelled, Milo began. He wanted to keep the berserker away from the battle madness of his kind. It was useful, very useful, but only in the proper place and time. And to erupt, not even knowing the nature of the enemy, was frank folly. Then sooner or later, we shall meet the spellcaster? To Milo's relief, Fangtooth seemed well able to control the power of the wear change. That was his by right. Yes, that is what I believe we have to wait for. The druid, without a single glance in their direction, had set his now empty bowl and got to his feet, bringing down on the tabletop a small coin. He wore, Milo noted as he turned and his robe flapped up a little, not the sandals suitable for our city streets, but badly cured and clumsily made hide boots, such as a peasant might use for the labor in ill weather. The bag, marked with runes on his training, was a small one and a shabby as his robe. He gave a jerk to bring his cowl higher over his head and started for the outer door. Nor did he make any attempt to approach their table. Milo was glad to see the last of him. Words were chancy at best, and there were those that had the brand of chaos and the powers of the outer dark at their call. Though this one was manifestly low placed in that close-knit and secret fraternity. Fangtooth's lips pursed as if he could split the figure now tugging along aside the door curtain. Cooker of spells, he commented. But not the one who holds us, Milo said. True enough. Tell me, swordsman, does your skin now prickle? Does it seem that without your helm to hold it down, your very hair might rise on your head? Whatever has netted us comes the closer, yet a man cannot fight what he cannot see, hear, or know is lie. The berserker was far more astute than Milo had first thought him. Because of the very nature of the bestial ferocity such fighters fell into, upon occasion, one was apt to forget that they had their own powers and more moved by intelligence as well as superhuman strength they could command. Fangtooth had the right of it. His own discomfort had been steadily growing. What they awaited was nearly here. Now, the 5 whisperers also rose and passed one by one beyond the curtain. It was as if someone or something were clearing the stage for a struggle. Yet still Milo could not locate any of the signs of chaos. On the berserker's shoulder, the pseudo-dragon chittered, rubbing its head back and forth on the cheekplate of the boar-crowned helmet. Milo found himself watching, not the small reptile, but rather the bracelet on his wrist. It seemed to have loosened somewhat its grip against his mail. 2 of the dice began to slowly spin. Now! Nail got to his seat. In his left hand, he held a deadly battle axe of such weight that Milo, trained though he was to handle many different weapons, thought he could never have brought to shoulder height. They were alone in the long room, even though those who had served had gone, as if they had some private knowledge of ill to come to those and would not witness it. Still, what Milo felt was not the warning prick of normal fear, rather an excitement, as if he stood on the verge of learning the answer to all questions. As Nail had done, he got to his seat, lifted his shield. The dice on his bracelet whirled to a stop as the high door curtain was drawn aside, letting in a blast of late fall winter-touched air. A man, slight, and so well cloaked that he seemed merely some shadow detached from a nearby wall to roam homelessly about, came swiftly in. And with that, that is the end of Chapter 1 of Quag Keep. There are 18 chapters. I will be going through them, not preferably here. I will take three of you to other locations to read this whole thing. But for now, that's the end of Chapter 1. Hello, Broken